What's up guys, this is Yasin and today we're going to be going over the best budget and rogue decks that you can play this format post ban list. So there's like 40 decks here and we're going to be ranking them in these 4 categories. The first one is going to be cheap and meta, so those are the decks that you can get for not too much money, usually less than like $100 or $200, and that are pretty much almost equally as good as like number 1 deck that would be maybe like $1,000 or something. And then the decks that I think are a great long-term investment, maybe not necessarily the best right now, the decks that are maybe not the best for the TCG, but very, very good for Genesis, and the decks that are really just there for, you know, locals and regionals if you want to have fun. So those decks are more like rogue, and obviously like above it's like top tier meta decks that are also conveniently happen to be cheap. And some of them you may have to play in a worse way. So for example, Yummy without Marshmallow, that's still going to be in the cheap and meta section, spoiler alert. Before we go any further, as always, you know the drill, smash the like and subscribe button. The first deck is the Utopic deck. I think this deck is very good for Genesis. It's not worth much money. So if you want to play a deck that is like very hardcore combo that can play a huge amount of hand traps, I think this deck is perfect for you. And if you want to play it competitively in the TCG, I recommend playing some Razor cards so that, you know, it's not expensive either. This deck I'm probably just going to place in cheap and meta. It's also a deck that you can argue is a great long-term investment because for some reason it just keeps dodging the ban list every single time. I mean, recently we've got Evilsaur Morobros getting banned as well as Protoss, and it really just doesn't care whatsoever because it can still search Featherstorm using Prime Mathmech Alimbertion, and then you still are able to make a Castell and everything so that you got your Wing Beast. It is ridiculous. All of that off of one single card, by the way. It's either Dodo the Warrior or Go Goblinberg. Super consistent and explosive deck. And again, it can play a huge amount of non-engine, and it is not worth a lot of money. So if you want to play either deck that can play the Automata engine, I think you're already in for you're already in a really good direction. Now, anything that involves like the Sulfa Cord engine, I think is a great long-term investment. If you want to play like Sulfa Cord Yummy, obviously it could be in this section, or like Yummy Mitsurugi Sulfa Cord. But the Mitsurugi cards are super, super expensive, so it's kind of hard for me to justify them being, you know, anywhere, like any deck that would utilize the engine, can't really put it here. And also Yummy, it depends on how you build the deck. Like if you play Board Breaker Yummy, I think it can be very cheap, but if you start playing with like Dominus Purge and those kinds of cards, and also 3 Marshmallow, it becomes a little too expensive. So you could theoretically play Yummy with 0 Marshmallow. Your deck would be good, but it wouldn't be like super, super good. You know, if you're on a budget, I can still kind of see it being here, honestly. It wouldn't really apply for everyone. Whereas Yummy, on the other hand, I still think that even as a splashable engine, it's just incredibly good for the amount of money that you're spending on, again, literally everything that isn't Marshmallow. And it can still work. It's not like it's unplayable. The Radiant Typhoon engine or deck or whatever cards, perfect for Genesis, maybe not for the TCG, except for the Radiant Typhoon Quick Play that makes you draw 2 cards and discard 1. Very good in Sky Striker. That's about it. Sword Soul, I think, is a great long-term investment because there's going to be a new Fallen of Albaz in, I think it's Burst Protocol, and that card is actually really nice in Sword Soul. It's a 1-card, level 8 Synchro, and it doesn't take up your normal summon either. And then you summon the Incredible Ecclesia, which can tribute itself to summon a Sword Soul monster from your deck, so you can summon Tai or like Moi or whatever, and then you can play from there. Great synergy. I honestly like it so much, so I definitely do believe in Sword Soul in the long term. But it cannot search Protoss anymore because Protoss is now banned. And that was like the Archimedes monster that we were searching. It's not like you could really go for his shadows in that deck. So that is kind of a drawback for the deck. So it lost Baron as well as Protoss over time. Definitely a little unfortunate for the deck. So in the TCG, it's maybe not the best right now, but maybe in the future it's going to be good. DDD, I think this deck is super close to being meta, but the power creep unfortunately really hit this deck. Like, even if the deck is super good and super strong and, I mean, powerful with 1 single card, and it does play through a lot, the best decks right now are so ignorant that, honestly, if your deck can't play a huge amount of non-engine and a huge amount of starters and a very small amount of bricks, usually they can't really keep up, and DDD just feels like it struggles a little bit too much with that. And also, if you want to play the best version of DDD, you're going to have like 3 Dominus Impulse, and that's already over like $100, unfortunately. So yeah, it might be a good long-term investment if you want to build it like cheap without Dominus Impulse and then wait until it gets reprinted again. But maybe right now I can't really recommend, you know, buying the whole DDD deck because it is not the perfect timing for it. Purely, I think this deck is very good for Genesis, a decent long-term investment, and also it's not too bad. It's the kind of deck that you can actually bring to like a regional and do very well with. And it's not like you're just having fun, you're also beating people with it. So it's probably gonna have to be like at the very top or like middle or whatever like of this section. I mean, all these decks honestly are very good in the Genesis format anyway, so I'll believe in them. And also it's not like these decks or like these cards overall just suck. Like they're all good, even like the real game. You know, I could lose the dice roll against any of these decks and actually just not feel safe, even if I'm playing the best deck. Mermail, I think this deck is definitely a great long-term investment. It doesn't take much. I mean, the Water Bear statue for some reason dodged the ban list, but if it gets hit on the next ban list, then it could be a little bit of a problem, but the deck just has such a high ceiling that honestly it doesn't really matter all that much. I still believe in Mermail, for sure. You can almost argue it should be here, actually. The Chimera deck, that's always going to be a great long-term investment because, I mean, this deck has been around for like 2 years or something, and for some reason, it never got a hit, even indirectly. Like, it just keeps dodging the ban list because, to be fair, it's not doing that much. But at the same time, we just really need like some good pilots and also playing this deck at the right time, and this deck would definitely be cracked. I think just like overall, the engine of the deck is just like very strong and very resilient. Crazy grind game, infinite recursion, and also very layered. You have like so many effects pretty much from anywhere. Like you got cards in your spell and Shadow Zone, effects in the grave, effects on your field. Like it's the kind of deck that doesn't lose to Dark Ruler and stuff. And you're also making your opponent lose cards from hand. Just very good mechanic overall. The Monarch deck. Oh, this one I think it's good for Genesis. It's not bad for locals and regionals. I don't really know if it's like perfect for the Genesis format though, but I still need maybe some more testing with it. It could be both, honestly, because it's very good in the Genesis format too. So yeah, actually I think it's a good deck overall, but I'm still gonna place it in locals and regional fun because it won a regional in Rochester, and that's pretty nice. Actually, it really just proves that even in the TCG, it is a very respectable deck if you win the dice roll and if it's your day, honestly, because going second, I think it's going to be a little more rough for a deck like Monarch. Vanquish Soul, this deck is not the best for regionals, for Genesis, but it should be like somewhat playable for, you know, smaller scale events. The RB deck is obviously unplayable for Genesis, but it is definitely a cute deck, and I can't really say if it's going to be a great long-term investment because there's no way for me to randomly guess if Konami is going to forget about this deck or gonna keep supporting it with a third wave of support in Burst Protocol. I doubt it because they already announced that the next TCG exclusive is going to come out and it's gonna be like a scientist with dinosaurs and stuff like that. So I think they're just gonna forget about RB, meaning that this may not be the best long-term investment, unfortunately, but it is still very cheap. Like, again, every deck in here is pretty cheap because they're not necessarily like the most expensive cards, like the chase cards that everybody's after. The Mitsurugi cards are super expensive though. Anyways, Malice. This you can play without Dominus Impulse. You're gonna have a little bit of a disadvantage, but you can still play like a huge Bestial count. You know, cards that are pretty cheap. You know, you play the cheap hand shops, or the cards in Malice that are maybe not gonna cost you an arm. Honestly, I think if you build this deck smart, it shouldn't cost you too much money. It really does depend on how you deck build, but I think it's a very good deck for how relatively cheap it is. At least it really isn't as bad as it was before. Tri Brigade, yeah, that's just the locals and regionals fun deck. Exorcister, definitely very good for Genesis, and this deck, actually, you know what? No. It's not just good for Genesis. It's a great long-term investment because the new support with Carmel as well as Bat Mater or whatever, it's gonna be so cracked. You really need to get your hands on this deck before it's too late, so I'm definitely gonna have to place this at the very top of great investment, if anything. I really like the new support. You can beat Nibiru now and make a big board. It's not like you have to play conservative into Nibiru or like randomly draw the Carpe Diem. And his Dinosaur, it's a decent long-term investment because we could get the TCG exclusive that could make it like better. So maybe I can place it here. I'm honestly not sure. There's no way for me to guess right now. But I'm gonna be making an updated video on this, like, when we are getting close to Burst Protocol. But right now, I'm just gonna place it in locals and regionals fun. I don't really think this deck is perfect for Genesis because of the points. I think Miscellaneous Oris costs a lot of points. Unchained, I'm gonna place it here as well. I don't really think this deck has been doing much for a hot minute. People just keep forgetting that this deck even exists, actually. So maybe it doesn't mean that it's bad. Maybe it's just people are kind of fed up. Okay, yeah, obviously without the shadow of a doubt, any deck that plays Branded Fusion, or like the Despia deck, has been a remarkable investment since 2022, and it's still good right now because the card is insane, and every single monster that you can summon is insane, and the Fallen of Albaz lore, bro, it's Konami's favorite. I think Fallen of Albaz might be Konami's favorite card of all time. They keep creating insane support around it, like, without a shadow of it. You know what, bro? It's cheap in meta. I don't even know what I'm saying. It's really not too expensive at all. Like, there is like a freaking structure deck for this. It doesn't cost you that much to get most of the cards that you need, and you also don't need crazy expensive staples for the most part to play this deck. Honestly, this is also like a very good deck for anyone that is like new to the game, trying to come back, trying to learn the mechanics. You learn slowly but surely. You start with fusions, which you probably already knew if you're an old school player. You know, activating polymerization, fuse away 2 monsters from your hand. That's something that everybody has been, you know, doing since day one. Branded Fusion, it makes you, you know, learn the mechanic in a different way. But I think this deck is honestly perfect for everyone, anyone literally who just doesn't want to spend like too much money or like brain power thinking about the game. But it also makes you learn the game very well, because if you do want to, you know, spend those brain cells to improve with the deck, you definitely can do so, because the deck has a very, very high ceiling, and it can get very complicated if you want to master it to perfection. Fire King, I think this deck is absolutely a great long-term investment for sure. Gonna place it there. There's so many innovative things that you can do with it. You can play with Jirac, you can play a lot of hand traps, you can play with Dominus Impulse, which obviously is a good card. You can play with Dominus Spiral, which is not too bad. So yeah, every now and then this deck gets random indirect support, which is cool. And also, there's always gonna be great players who are gonna find like super awesome ways of making this deck even better than it already is and was before. So yeah. The Buster Blader stuff, maybe just for Genesis or locals and regionals. I got a top 16 at YCS, and I got to play against the one player who topped with it, so shoutouts to you. But yeah, the engine is actually good. I don't know why not enough players have tried playing with it. And then speaking of, you know, Blue Eyes and Buster Blader, regular Blue Eyes, I think this is closer to being like a great long-term investment, so I'm probably gonna place it here or there, whatever. It doesn't really matter too much, but it's not worth a lot of money at all. It just, everything keeps going down. Dominus Purge might be like the most expensive card in the deck, I think, at this point. Because, you know, like, it got lucky with a structure deck giving you basically everything you need, which is fantastic. Orchist, in general, I think I'm gonna place it in great long-term investment too. I'm not, like, super convinced on how this deck could be in the TCG right now, because it definitely isn't, like, a super competitive deck. But it's not worth a lot of money. You definitely can't play it in Genesis because you need links, obviously. What else are you gonna do? But yeah, you know, like, it's a deck that is like very mid, but at the same time, it can randomly be good at any moment. Like, it did win the NEWCQ Hero. Also a deck that is going to be getting much better over time. There's a reason, by the way, why there's so many decks in here that are not necessarily good right now, but still very good over time. It's because they're getting more support. Like, I literally just reviewed one of the newer cards, the Miracle Ejector or something. That is a 1-card hero combo. It's pretty nice. And also the new Master Hero support. Fantastic. This deck, every single year, it's always going to be getting some more direct or indirect support. So yeah, it definitely is something that I believe in, at the very least for the long term. Not right now. Generator, perfect deck for Genesis. That's about it. Sky Striker, it is actually a cheap and meta deck, but honestly, it kind of is expensive. So I will be placing it here. Same thing with all these 3 decks. Like, some of the cards are worth a little bit of money. I think Malice might be the cheaper one, ironically. So maybe in this order, in terms of like a ratio, I guess, of how expensive they are versus how good they are. Yeah, these decks have like the best ratio, I think. Doom Z, I mean, it's a fun deck. I don't really think it's a great long-term investment. I think it has like, out of all the Medius lore decks, so there's Archmage, Doom Z, as well as Elven Notes, this one might be the worst. Archmage, I think, is very good for Genesis. Oh, by the way, Archmage should definitely be in this section. It really should be in perfect for Genesis. I am sorry about that. I completely forgot about the deck. So, yeah, just in case someone is going to comment, oh, where's Archmage, Yaxine? I forgot. But yeah, it would be at the very top. But yeah, Elven Notes is going to be like a cheap and meta deck. Oh, actually, no, it might not be cheap. If people actually catch on to Elven Notes, or if the OCG starts playing it like crazy, it'll definitely be like a top tier deck, because I think the deck is very, very competitive. It definitely is a tier 1 deck. Doomsday, on the other hand, I think it's the worst one. Even though it's not like garbage, hey, just missing a little something. But it can play the Fiendsmith engine very well because, again, it plays Theo Realize. And that card is nice. K9 decks in general, I mean, yeah, of course. Of course, these decks are very good and not expensive, except for Izuna, which is worth, like, pretty much like $20. So you can play, like, one Izuna and then, like, one Lupus and then side 2 Lupus. So that against Yami Mitsurugi, you're still playing, like, a lot of good cards against them because Lupus into Typhon, so that you can make a Zeus and then wipe everything on turn 1. I mean, turn 2, you know, that's really good. So I think that this is something that you can do if you don't have a lot of money. It spares you $40 on the Norois and stuff. Not too bad. Memento. Right now is not the best timing to play Memento at all because people are playing Retelling Sea to beat Dragon Tail, and this will suffer from a lot of collateral damage, you know. Now you've got even more handshots that can cripple you to oblivion, and going second against the FTK decks, you are getting absolutely shredded. Evil Twin. Probably gonna place it here, even though, again, it did win a YCS not even that long ago, so it is crazy for me to put it here. I think this deck, every single time I see it, it never does well, except for that one time where it won the YCS, and it confused the crap out of everyone. White Forest, it's a good deck. It's a good deck. That's all I'm gonna say. Okay, these two decks are pretty much identical, Eldritch and Labyrinth. Eldritch is very good in Genesis, Labyrinth a little less because the engine actually costs points. So yeah, both of these decks are very good long-term investments, but they're not like fantastic decks overall, just because going second, you will be struggling against, you know, the combo decks that are way too fast. You can't really keep up with them. And Lightning Storm is now a 3. Even more cards that can just destroy you. There's also handshots that can beat both of these decks, you know, Ash, Bell, Impulse. So imagine, like, you're not supposed to lose the handshots, but you still lose the 9 cards that, you know, some decks can play, and that does feel a little rough, unfortunately. Tier Elements, I think this is just nothing more than a locals and regionals deck. Maybe worse than, yeah, I'm probably gonna place it, like, here-ish, maybe. The exact order doesn't matter. Yeah, maybe something like this. I don't know. I really don't care. Dragon Tail. Yeah, of course. Yeah, this deck is not worth a lot of money. 5 mana is worth like 20, I think. And then Altherion is like 5. Mululu like 7, 8. Yeah, and then you can play the cheap handshots if you want to. At the very least, this deck doesn't have to play the super expensive handshots like the Dominus cards. And then you can definitely play like a cheaper extra deck as well. I think this might be the cheapest good Chuhu decks that you can play. Honestly, very, very good. And also in the long term, I do think that Dragon Tail is also going to retain a lot of value. Because even if the deck itself becomes garbage, at least you can still play Dragon Tail as an engine. And that's nice. So the cards themselves are always going to be good. And you would still, at the very least, be able to play Dragon Tail in Genesis. Even if the cards get limited and stuff. The cards are expensive in points anyways. And even then, the deck is still fantastic in Genesis. Even with the limitation. If you want to play... Okay, this is a weird one. Because Inclusion got limited, so even though I actually used to place it like at the very top before, now because of Inclusion being limited, I can kind of see a world in which they can unlimit Inclusion if they choose to destroy some of the K9 cards instead. They've done similar trades in the past where they were semi-limiting Malicious, because Malicious was being abused by like Gookie and like Warrior decks in general. And in order to compensate for the hero players, they were giving them like 1 extra Stratos. And Inclusion right now, it does kind of feel a little bit like Malicious from back in the days. It is played in K9 Crystron, and it really is handicapping the regular Crystron deck, which is fair enough to the point where it shouldn't get a hit on the ban list, which is a little unfair for, like I said, for them. So I can see a world in which Inclusion gets unlimited, and then there's also like the new Crystron Link 3 that's coming out. Maybe that's going to push Konami to unban Crystron Needle Fiber, the Link 2, with an errata to only make it good in Crystron. So I can see Crystron, the regular deck, not K9 Crystron, be a very, very good long-term investment. But with that said, regular Crystron can't be in cheap and meta. So I'm just going to keep it in great long-term investment. Punk is not only good right now, it's good in the long term, and it's good for Genesis. So regardless of where I put it, it's a good option for you. Sprite Elf might get unbanned. Copium, probably not. Tenpai Dragon is unplayable for Genesis. You know what? Yo, screw Tenpai. I'm just gonna put it there. There you go. It doesn't suck, though. Like, in the OCG, best out of 1, this deck is still cracked. So maybe you can play it in Master Duel. And actually, you can play it in... Yeah, you can't play it in TCG, and you can't play in Genesis. And this video is literally all about TCG and Genesis. Like, literally the worst formats for Tenpai. And then Lunalite, last but absolutely not least, this deck is worth nothing, and you basically don't really have to make any concessions. Heavy Polymerization is the only card, as well as Gold Leo, literally the only 2 cards that are worth anything in the deck. You don't have to play Dominus Impulse if you don't want to. You can just play all Board Breakers, and Board Breakers are very cheap cards by default, which is perfect for you. So yeah, overall, I'm really satisfied with this list. It's actually crazy to think that, obviously, there are some caveats. Like, you can't really play full power Yummy and make it a cheap deck, but there is a way for you to play a cheap version of Yummy, and it still has a very good ratio of, you know, how good it is for how cheap it is. So that's the reason why it's there, but it's not at the very top. Lunalite has one of the best ratios. Dragon Tail, fantastic ratio. Despia, incredibly good. Even though I think Despia is, like, less good than these 2 decks right now. But overall, like, in the long term, I think it might end up, like, surpassing them. Especially since, like, this deck is dirt cheap, and it's still very, very good. And then, yeah, Razor Automat, obviously good deck. K9-based decks, super cheap and super good, except for Izuna. And then Malice, I think March here, or some random stuff might be worth a little bit of money, but I'm not sure. And then Yummy, it's really just Marshmallow. And this is like some random Sky Striker cards are, for some reason, worth a little bit of money. Yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know which rogue and budget deck do you think are the most worth investing your money and time into, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.